In this video, we're going to look at some examples of good and bad concession paragraphs. Again, a concession is optional, but if you're going to do it, you want to do it right or it can really backfire, and we'll see that in these examples. So the topic we're going to use today is this question: should Congress pass ENDA, which stands for the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, pass it into law? And that's a bill that would make it illegal to fire an employee solely based on his or her sexual orientation, because right now it's legal to do that in many states. So here's the thesis, and this is another example, by the way, of a good thesis statement for a pro-con type of argument. So we have the stance: Congress should pass ENDA into law, right? I'll bold that. And then we have the reasons: because, and then we've got all the reasons there. And those are going to be the things that are discussed in the confirmation paragraphs. But for now, we're looking at the concession. So we've got two concession paragraphs, A and B. And I'd like you to just pause the video, read those two, decide which you think is better based on what we just talked about, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay. So B is the good one and A is the bad one. Let's look first at why A is not a good concession paragraph. First of all, it sounds like they've just changed sides because they don't have any signaling language that indicates that it's a concession. There's no admittedly or of course or it is true that, and the tone is just very much saying, oh, ENDA is bad, right? And of course, if you look at the stance here, this is a pro-ENDA essay, so this is a terrible backfire. This would be a paper that would have been better without the concession because they couldn't do it right. So, you know, and it just kind of sounds like the other side. In fact, I've had students tell me, well, I thought a concession was where you just sort of wrote down what the other side sounded like when they were talking. No, you never do that in an essay. You always sound like you when you're talking. And so this just confuses the reader. It seems to contradict the thesis, and it really hurts the essay. B is the good example. All right, so the first sentence does a nice job of setting up that if this is a concession, right? It uses the word admittedly, right? That helps to indicate that, okay, we're conceding. That's good signaling language. And it admits what the point is, right? That Congress should not pass laws that force religious organizations to do something they don't want to do. And it just gives a little explanation in these sentences. I guess we've got about really just two sentences there, just briefly explaining why that point is a good point, right? Why, the other side's point that religious organizations shouldn't be compelled to do something against their will, and it just sort of explains that. And then at the end here, and I'll put that in purple, this is a very nice kind of way to minimize the point that they're conceding. They're saying, well, ENDA doesn't really do that, right? It specifically exempts religious organizations, so that means this other side, that the point the other side brings up really isn't that big of a deal. Now, you can't always do that. Sometimes the best you can do is say, well, that was a good point, but it's really outweighed by what I'm going to talk about next in the confirmation. But I think the important thing here, the thing that people often have a problem with, is they don't signal well enough that they're conceding. You need something like that first sentence in B to make it clear it's a concession so that people don't get confused and don't think you're contradicting your thesis. And if you want to look at the organizational principles for that again, they are in the previous video.